The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with my co-host Dan Rylance. Before we get into tonight's show, just want to make one little brief announcement. On our last show we had Chancellor Wells on from the university, and we had asked him toward the end of the show about whether or not campus police had tasers. Chancellor Wells said no, they did not. However,
they do.
Yes, they do. He found that out when he got back to his office and asked if we could change the show. Well, of course, once it's done, we can't do any editing or whatever. So I told him that we'd put that correction on our website, which we have done, and told him I'd make a little announcement on this show. So they do have tasers on UWO campus, and they have had for years, apparently. So that being the case, welcome to this edition. And we're very pleased to be joined tonight by Judge Scott Woldt, whom most of you are familiar with. He's been on the show before, and he's served now for a few years in our court system here. And also one of the county drug court's recent graduates, Cynthia Running, is joining us as well. This show is going to be split in two. We're going to be talking in the second half with two former Common Council members. So lots of things on our agenda tonight. So we appreciate the flexibility that both of you have given, and thanks much for being here. Very first thing, on August 24th, the drug court had its first graduation of two people, Tom Nikolajczyk, am I pronouncing that right?
Nikolajczyk, yes.
Okay, and Cynthia, of course, so congratulations to you,
yes,
on your graduation. Let's start out by, you know, when the drug court was just kicking off, you and Judge Key were here, but for anyone who maybe missed that show, tell viewers a little bit about the drug court, how it came to be here, and what its purpose is.
Well, we started the drug court because when I got on the bench, I saw that about 90% of all the cases that came before me were there because of drugs and alcohol. And if you look at the definition of insanity, it's doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results. And that's what we're doing in the criminal justice system. We here in the United States have more people in prison than the rest of the world combined. And something had to be done. And I did some research on drug courts, and the sheriff came up to me and asked me, are you interested in doing something like this? So we took a trip and started doing it. The whole purpose of doing this is trying to save some money for the county. Recidivism rates are big because, you know, I've been on the bench almost 4 years now, and I've been seeing the same people over and over and over. And there just has to be a breaking point. And now we put people on probation, and you see from some of the information I've seen you, or sent to you, we'll test these people during the year they're in the program 150 times. You're on probation for a year and a half, like she was in the drug court for 14 months. If she was on probation, just probation, she probably would have been tested 5 or 6 times. It's very intensive treatment, and the whole purpose of this is we find that if we can do something intensive with these people that are in court because of drug-related offenses, and that's what you have to be. You have to be a Winnebago County resident. We don't want people moving to this county to be in the drug court. We want to deal with their own residents. Also have to have a drug-related felony offense. It has to be a non-violent offense. And you have to have a diagnosis of being drug dependent or alcohol dependent. And have to voluntarily want to be in the program. And at first we wanted people, everyone wanted to be in our program because it's easy. After about 6 months, we had people not wanting to get in the program because they heard it's too hard. So that's the whole purpose of the program. It's intensive treatment in order to stop these people from continuing to come back through the system.
Well, I know when you know, when it first kind of kicked off, it was relatively warmly received. But as with anything new and untried in our area, you know, things are always going to be met with a certain amount of skepticism. What's the reception been among law enforcement so far?
Well, in this county, we've actually have a ton of support. The Chiefs Association's all on supporting it. The sheriff, all the local politicians support it. I got some laws changed with respect to OWIs, and Cal Wrestler supported it. We have Republicans, Democrats, everyone supported it. And actually, drug courts now are starting to take off, although they started in Miami, of all places. Can you imagine that with drugs? Started in 1989 there, and there are about 1,000 of drug courts throughout the United States. And in Wisconsin itself, we have 72 counties, we have 12 drug courts, so they're just starting here. And in fact, I was telling Dan that next week I'm at the judicial conference and I'm doing an afternoon session on teaching judges how to start drug courts. So actually it's an up-and-coming thing, and I know the Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court is very supportive of drug court programs, alternatives to incarceration.
Okay. Well, Cynthia, you know, as we mentioned, you graduated just a couple of months ago, back in August, late August. You know, give us a little sense of what you were dealing with. What kind of drugs were you dealing with, and how frequent, and, you know, give us a sense of what your own situation was.
I started using drugs like marijuana when I was in, I was 13, 14 years old. So I had been using, after I was probably 18, I switched to cocaine, and that was my drug of choice. Alcohol wasn't a real big thing, but the cocaine, it got real heavy towards the end, so I'd been using drugs pretty much on and off for like 30 years.
30 years. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm 45, and you do the math.
Started really young.
Yeah. Didn't learn my lesson until I got older.
And your situation is even a little bit more unique because you've got a brother who is in law enforcement, right?
Actually, both of my brothers are.
Both your brothers, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I had a secret, and I had gone through treatment before, and it just, there wasn't the support there. When you got out, it was just do your 28 days and, you know, you're good luck. Mm-hmm. And this, I think the program's so structured that, I mean, every day is drug court. Every day you had a call in the morning for your UA right away, and your whole day, I mean, work, your meetings, you know, treatment. I mean, it's very, very intense. And I mean, there's times where it was like, can I really do this? But I'm here, so.
And Judge, it's a year-long program, then you said?
That's the quickest you get through is 1 year.
Okay.
We've had people in there for 18 months so far. They're still struggling to get through the program, but we continue to work with them. We don't terminate people for continuing to use. We'll terminate them for new offenses, if they commit a new offense, or if they remove themselves, remove themselves from the program, get terminated from treatment. We've done everything we can, and they continue to violate, then we'll terminate at that point. But for using, we don't.
Okay. And you have had a few terminations, right?
The national average for terminations is right around 44%,
mm-hmm.
and we're a little bit underneath that, so we're close to the average, but we're underneath that. It's a hard program to get through, and I think people are understanding that now. They get in at first and they think, oh, this is my way to get out of jail or get out of prison, and it's a tough program. Cynthia can tell you about it.
Yeah. Cynthia, how long had you, well, not how long, but how many times had you been in jail prior to going into the drug court program?
I had another offense like 3 or 4 years ago, so it was my second time in jail, and I was looking at prison probably more than a few years I would have been. And I'm just not a toughie. I don't
not prison
that.
Material, huh?
No. I had a very hard time in jail, and when they asked me about the drug court program, I was like, well, you know, I wanted to know what it all entailed, and I knew I needed help. I had coke I was using almost every day, and my finances, everything, all the money, whenever I got paid, that's the first thing it went for, and my life was just a mess. And sitting in jail, and it's a really rude awakening, like, wow, you know, how did I get here?
Sure. Go ahead, Dan.
Cynthia, to compliment you on being here, not to patronize. Let's go through the 3 stages of the 3 phases, and maybe you can kind of walk us through a little bit about maybe stages in your psychology in terms of how it started, some of the problems you had, how you got through it, and maybe some advice for people that are listening that might want to know more about it.
Okay.
Phase 1, what was that like?
Oh.
What did you do?
I think that's the toughest.
Okay, I'm sure.
Well, first of all, was I was in jail, so they usually release you from jail and you go right to treatment. It's a 28-day inpatient treatment.
Okay.
And then I stayed 90 days after that in the halfway house. But the first, I think, the phase 1 was once it starts when you get into treatment, I believe, right? And so the first 28 days is just strictly treatment, intense, no contact with pretty much anyone outside, and it's real. The place I went to is awesome. Nova is, I can't say enough good things about them. The counselors are great. Anyway, then UAs every morning you had to call for a UA. You had to go either the morning from like 8 to 8:15 or 8 to 9, I think it was at that time, and then or between 4 and 5. If you were late, it was considered dirty. So that was every day you had to call for that. Plus, you had meetings, I believe, was it 3 to 5 meetings a week?
Yes.
And then you're a probation officer once a week, and Carol Cook, the drug court coordinator, once a week, and drug court every Friday at 2 o'clock. And you had to turn in your slips for meetings. If you missed any of that.
How was that tough timing to begin with?
It was a lot of stuff to do. And then I think once you got out of treatment, you had the opportunity to find a job. So then they kind of gave you points. You had plus on top of that, community service. You had to have, I think, phase 1, I want to say, was it 25 hours phase 1, or was it more than that?
You have to get your 10 points. So
yeah, 10 points. Yeah, so you had to get. Oh, so that's 50. That would be 50 because each 5 hours of community service is 1 point. So on top of all that, you had to do your community service and find a job, and it was busy, very busy. And in fact, I was telling him earlier that I was sitting in the driveway at my brother's house. I said, I don't know if I can do this. I just don't know that I can do this. And he said, where can you breathe? And I thought, well, probably right outside here.
Did it get easier after phase 1?
And phase 2, yes, you went to court every other week. You still had to call for UAs every morning, and those went down to 2 to 3 UAs a week. Phase 1 was what, 3 to 5 somewhere, and it fluctuated. So, and you didn't know every day if you were going to have a UA or not. So that was your number 1 thing in the morning, call right away.
Okay.
And that's basically a drug screen for
yes,
for
UA.
our viewers.
We have a codaphone with different colors. So if your color comes up, you have to be there at a certain time.
And if you're late, it's considered dirty. If you can't go, I mean, you got to be prepared.
When do you think you turned the corner on this? Phase 2, or when did it become?
I know I was a little stubborn for a while there. Well, probably like phase 2, I think, because you really they gave you a little more freedom, but you also were out in. That's when you kind of were out in out and back in the real world. So it was. You're doing your community service and you get a job and you get a little more freedom, but you still are structured. So it's kind of weaning you out into society again. And it was like, well, it's a little easier, but still, there's a long road yet from there.
You mentioned earlier that this was sort of your secret, that your family didn't know about it.
Yeah, well, they knew something was wrong or something was up.
Can you share some hints for parents who have children that are teenagers and stuff that might be helpful in terms of identifying maybe suspicions, but nothing more than that? Can you come up with a couple of?
Yeah, I had all kinds of them. Well, my family knew kind of that something was up. My family growing up, we were a very tight-knit family. We did everything together. My parents were awesome. And I don't know, I had something happen to me when I was a teenager, and I didn't tell anyone. It's one thing, I always try to talk. I stopped talking, and I didn't want to be around my family anymore, and I would sneak out, and it's just like I just cut everyone off, and that's the sign right there. I didn't want them to know some things, and we would conflict, and I probably still have 8 years of grounding left from my family. It was, I was gone a lot, and like I said, I just didn't. I was sneaking around, lying. And the other thing too, my mom always said, "You are who you hang out with," and I never believed her, but she's right. And keep a close eye on your friends, your kids' friends, I think, and a lot of that can tell you a lot of things too. You know.
Do your parents confront you on changes in behavior?
Yeah. Oh yeah. My dad. I got caught with marijuana a few times in high school, and I remember him taking the tires off my car. So that's how bad I was grounded, so I couldn't use the car. They were in his bedroom.
The tires were in his bedroom.
Yes, I couldn't, because I tried putting them back on.
Okay, I see.
You were determined, weren't you?
I was going to go somewhere. Yeah, there was a few things, and I remember him always writing me notes, and I got real skinny. I wouldn't eat, and then if I did come home, my mom would hear me in the kitchen noise, you know, the munchies coming home at night, so that was a big thing. Just kind of being standoffish and just like, you don't know anything, and they actually do know more than what we think they do now that I'm a parent. Oh yeah. I told my kids, you can try anything, I've done it all. So
Are your parents proud of you at this point?
Yes,
Yeah.
my mother's passed. My dad is very proud of me.
Excellent.
Yeah, he's
Very
very
good.
supportive.
Yeah. Cheryl?
Now, did you get through the program in a year?
It was, well, yeah, the amount of time, because, with the drug court, the schedule, but I had no incidents. I made it without any boo-boos. I was determined. I was not going back to that life. And it's got rid of all the people in my life except for 2 friends that stuck beside me and my family, and they're golden.
So you didn't fall back like some of the folks in the program. You just,
No.
your determination kept you on that right track.
Yeah, there's...
Excellent. So now that you've graduated, has it been difficult to stay clean and sober?
Actually, I really haven't had that, like, I know a lot of them struggle with that, but I think the support group that I have and my meetings and the people that I hang out with, and mostly my family, my brothers and my sister-in-laws and my kids, my granddaughter, I just look at that and I know I wouldn't have that anymore. My brother had wrote me a letter when I was in Nova and said, I'm not going to cry. This is the last time, and if I screw up again, my family that I have now will become significantly smaller, and I think about that every day. And like going riding on our bikes this weekend and just riding side by side with my brothers going down the highway is the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of the neatest thing for us as a drug court team, when we have the graduation, to talk with relatives and to see the metamorphosis of these people, because when they get in there, they're by themselves. You don't see a lot of family support, and at the end, the family coming up to us and thanking us for giving them back the person they knew and loved before all the drugs. And that's that's why I became a judge, because I wanted to help people. It's a tremendous feeling when people come up and they can't even speak because they're so happy and so grateful. And I'll tell them it wasn't me, it was her.
Well, I know that, when Cynthia and I had talked as we were kind of setting up this show, she said she really credits this program with saving her life, and giving her kind of a new lease on life. And, certainly that's a credit to you and, everyone connected with the program, Judge. Help us understand, once you've graduated then, are there additional requirements that the county puts on you, or is your debt to society, if you will, paid back at that point?
No, I'm paying restitution, and that comes out of my paycheck every week. And I have probation parole. I go every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. And no, I'll be on probation for probably a couple years. Once I get it paid off, she said she'll talk about early release, but I think it's probably about 3 or 4 years yet.
Okay. And do you still have to attend meetings also and things like that?
We do on our own. But I still go. And I've met some great people through there, and I've like my sponsor, and and it's kind of, you get to know these people very well, and when you start to think that you're really all alone, you're not. They've gone through it all together, and it's a lot of similarities, and it's easy to talk to them. Like my sponsor, we have the same interests. We ride, and it's amazing.
Some of the friends you talked about, friends, and you are who you hang out with. Where are they at today?
I don't see any of them. I do hear things, and I feel bad that they're still out there in that, pardon my language, hell. It's, I changed my phone number, and I just recently moved. I've cut off everything, and somehow one of my old friends had gotten my phone number, and she called me up and said, "Could you please help me? Just help me." And I said, "I can't do it. You have to do it yourself. I can't. I mean, I can tell you where to go or what to do, but I can't be around you like that. I can't. You have to do it yourself. You have to really want it." And when they're calling you at 2 in the morning, there's a sign. So I got everything's changed. My numbers changed. No contacts. I just stick with my family.
You did learn.
You got to be pretty proud of her.
Oh, very.
And it makes your program.
Oh, tremendously.
Talk about recidivism just for a minute. What are 2 or 3 factors that contribute most to recidivism?
Oh, the insanity. Okay. Doing the same thing over and over. Sending someone to prison, they're going to get out. I always like to say that, who do you want living next to you? Someone who's gone through a drug court treatment program, or someone who's gone to crime college, got a bachelor's degree in predatory arts, and comes out and preys on you? That's what happens. They don't learn anything. It's really interesting for me to sit here and listen to Cynthia, because all of the things that we try to teach our participants, she's stating all of those things. That's why I said at the end of what she was saying, you were listening, you got it.
It clicked.
Because we're different. We're dealing through this program. I've learned tremendously. I think I'm a much better person and tremendously better judge because of going through this program. These people are different. They're just tremendously different. I read a book from a judge in Minnesota, and he talks about NORP, a normal, ordinary, responsible person. People who are addicted are not NORPs. They think differently, and we try to get them the square peg into the round hole, and it just doesn't work, and that's what the prison system's all about. So we're trying to tailor treatment for what these individuals specifically need. No one in our program, we don't have people doing the same things. They're all doing different things because their needs are all different. And it's really neat to sit here and listen to her, and she got it. She gets it. But it is a tremendously, this is my high, this is my drug. Going through this and listening to this and seeing these people succeed. Every week when someone comes up and does something, it's tremendous. And I'll get tears in my eyes when we're up there. I got tears in my eyes when she graduated. It's fantastic.
Tell us just a little bit, Judge, about Tom, the other graduate. What was his story?
He was cocaine also, primarily, also alcohol. And he had some hiccups at the beginning, was fighting us a little bit at the beginning. And the thing I remember most about Tom was when he was in phase 3, because from the information I saw, you could see we make him do a lot of community service. And you could see from the testing, I think you had 156 UAs test during the time she was in there. Thomas had 138. They do a lot of community service work. And Thomas, I think, did 86 hours of community service during the time he was in there. And I was a little bit shocked at that number. And the reason I was because Thomas didn't keep track of some of the community service work. And I said, Thomas, why don't you keep track of that extra time you put in community service, because those are all things I can use to sell this program, to tell the community, these people are paying back. He goes, Judge, I don't want to ask these people for that information because they're going to think I have to do the community service. And I want them to think that I want to do it, because I really do. At that point, I knew he changed. And that Thomas, from that point, was perfect.
The insanity was gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well said.
I want to talk for just a minute about, because this is obviously a creative kind of program. It's a creative way of exercising justice, and it's obviously it's working for some folks. I saw on the news last week that Green Bay is they've just recently started a truancy court. Obviously, with the truancy rates, what they are in this country, this seems to be maybe something that might work. Do you have any experience with truancy courts at all?
Well, statutorily, every couple of years, the school districts in each county have to get together and talk about truancy. And myself and Judge Key attended, I think Judge Seifert also attended that here in Winnebago County last year. And we had someone from Racine County who, they run a truancy court, and they came and talked to us about doing it. And there was some discussion about potentially doing that, and I've had people come and ask me about starting up the drug court for juveniles also. And right now I'm running the drug court, and I'm also running the STOP program for second and third time alcohol offenders. And at this point, I'm spreading, I don't want to spread myself too thin. I have right now I'm also backing the sheriff trying to get this day reporting center started, so it'll help us with our UAs. Now we're doing 5 days a week. I want to do it 7 days. So I want to make it call 2 more days a week.
Well, no one can say you're not hard working, that's for sure. You got a real quick question?
How many inmates in Wisconsin prisons are there on drug-related, roughly?
I would say at least 90%.
At least 90%.
At least.
Wow.
So the potential of what you're doing in a mini micro thing, you know, in a larger number in Wisconsin is twice as many inmates, say, as Minnesota, for example. You could do an incredible amount if you had the resources to really expand this.
When I went to get trained on this stuff, the first place I started was in Hastings, Minnesota.
Okay.
That's where they do this stuff.
Yeah.
That's where they started around here. So yeah, it's a tremendous cost savings.
Yeah.
How many people can the program accommodate at any given time?
Well, it depends on what level they're in, what phase. Obviously, if you have a lot of people, when we started out, we had a lot of people in phase 1. We couldn't take a lot because it's very intensive on our staff. But right now, the statistics will tell us that each judge can do 50. So we could probably have 100 people in here. And with Judge Key and I both doing it, 100 people.
And you two are the only judges out of the 6 that are involved in the drug court.
Yeah, it's developing a relationship with these people, and Judge Key and I find that based upon our schedules, if I go 2 weeks in a row and has a 2-week lapse and she comes back, you lose touch. You lose that little bit of connection with them. So we like to do it every other week so we don't lose that connection. And if you had another judge doing it, it would throw us off too much. Because you have to build that relationship with the people. I always say there's 2 Judge Woldts. There's the drug court Judge Woldt and the mean Judge Woldt.
That's possible. Well, yes, I've seen
You
them.
you haven't been in front of me other than in drug court.
And I never will be.
Well, we want to thank both of you
Yes.
for being here. And I wish we had more time because there's so many more things that we could talk about. But we'll have you back again.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you.
And
Good luck to
Cynthia,
you.
you're just a real testament to the program, and you should be very proud. And we're certainly all at this table very proud of you. So, and thank you for coming on. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will be joined by 2 former city council people, Jon Dell'Anontia and Kevin McGee. We'll be right back.
I escaped.
By foot?
Run across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. If you speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
All right, we're back with the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz, Dan Rylance, and now we're joined by, as we mentioned before the break, Jon Dell'Anontia over here and Kevin McGee to my immediate left. We're going to be talking about what everybody else is talking about. For months, people in the community have been buzzing about problems at City Hall and where the source of the problem is and you know, what should be done about it. And now, of course, since last Sunday, people are talking about more secrecy at City Hall. Specifically, the 100 block TIF project. Now we come to find out, I mean, obviously everybody knows that the building's in foreclosure, it's now in receivership. We're suing Ben Ganther and his partner. That's kind of old news at this juncture. What is new news is why you two folks are here, and that's that we now find out that our city attorney, Warren Kraft, according to the Oshkosh Northwestern, actually kind of worked, it seems, to keep $2.2 million in development assistance grant money kind of secret as far as how that money was being spent. He was working sort of on the behalf of Mr. Ganther, it seems. And you guys were on the council at the time, and we appreciate your coming on. You know, in April, now this is from the Northwestern, in an April 3rd, 2001 email, Warren Kraft wrote that he had concerns, quote, about Ganther's stuff becoming public records, unquote, while in another email he warned that, quote, open records law causes a problem, unquote. And now all of a sudden he's having a Ronald Reagan moment. He can't seem to remember, you know, what exactly transpired 5-6 years ago. And, you know, if you guys could go back and do this thing again, would you do it differently?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the short answer is yes.
Yeah. Were you surprised at the article in the paper?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Had never heard anything about, of course, those kind of escrow details would not be something routinely shared with the council.
I understand.
That's more administrative, you know, once the project was approved by the council, how does it get handled, you know, in-house? And so I'm sure neither John or I or anyone else that was on the council at the time knew anything about it.
Yeah. Kevin and I were talking about that before we came in. And clearly the emails, I was surprised to read about those emails because those emails we didn't see.
Of course.
Right,
they must have been to
members.
internal staff members and were never shared with us. You know, it's kind of interesting because even the current council, you know, is having some of these issues. Should it have been handled differently? I think obviously the answer you'd like to think it would be. But it's one of these things for council members when we were there and the ones that are there now, it's like, well, what is it that you're not telling me that I really ought to know or ought to be public record? And if you don't want me to know, you're not going to answer the question. And if I don't know what question to ask, I can't even ask the question because I don't know what I don't know. And in this case, we didn't know that this kind of thing was going on. Now, occasionally, something like this might leak out, but it didn't. At least not to me.
Well, and of course the problem now, if you want to call it a problem, is that, you know, just like the old saying, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. And now any kind of development deal is going to be looked at with even greater skepticism, even greater scrutiny. You know, a certain amount of scrutiny is very good in a council doing its due diligence, but do you think that this all is going to sort of snowball into a really, really negative effect on how future development deals are viewed and judged?
I wouldn't necessarily say a negative effect, but yeah, I think that there's going to be more scrutiny, more demand for information, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. In a sense, I think the mistake on the 100 block was that it wasn't scrutinized enough. And we sort of almost ended up making the same mistake with the Five Rivers thing. It for a while, that had all kind of momentum and everyone was cheering for it and so forth.
Not everyone can.
Well, I wasn't. I was looking at it with a lot of skepticism, but it seemed like it had a lot of momentum, and finally the information came out that, you know, this guy didn't have a nickel of his own to put into the project.
Right.
There should have been a lot more skepticism, a lot more scrutiny of that earlier on, and maybe we wouldn't have spent, I don't know, was it 2-3 years, you know, dancing with that partner before we realized that, you know, we weren't actually going to get invited to the prom.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I met the developer of Five Rivers once and talked to him, not in any formal capacity, just immediately. And my immediate reaction was, this guy hasn't got the financial wherewithal to do it, and I don't know why we're fooling around with him. I don't think he can pull it off. And subsequently, you know, we finally figured out that he couldn't. But I think we wasted way too much time. I hope this doesn't deter us from doing other developments. We learned, I think one of the good things to come out of this whole 100-block debacle is now, at least with the new proposal or new project that Access has, we've got a pay-go TIF. They've got to put the money out and do the project, then they get paid. Had that been done on the 100-block, most likely all of these things that are alleged, or I guess have happened, where you can't find out anything, you'd have to find out in order to get payment. So I think the positive from all of this is that now we're using a different form of TIF financing, and I'm still a believer in TIFs. If we didn't have them, there's just too many good things that we have in Oshkosh that we probably wouldn't have. You know, the Division Street is one. I think all the development along the Foundry wouldn't have been done without a TIF. So I think TIFs sometimes get a bad rap, but I like the pay-go idea much, much better than the way we used to do it. So that's probably the positive that's come out of this. The other positive, I believe, will come from this is, however this sorts out, perhaps the new owner of this 100-block building will make a success out of it. You know, there's an old saw in the real estate business that the third owner is the one that makes the money. Now, we're just on the second owner here, but hopefully they'll be able to do something with it. But time will tell.
Well, what about Warren Kraft? I mean, here he is, you know, he's supposed to be protecting the city's interests. He is the city attorney. And, you know, from certainly the way everything looks, he's been out there helping the developer. And, you know, Mr. Wolink, our city manager, we don't know if he's ever reprimanded Mr. Kraft for anything. But certainly, you know, he seems to think that Mr. Kraft is a dutiful public servant and has been doing his job well. If he didn't, I think Mr. Kraft would no longer have a job. What do you think now should happen with Mr. Kraft?
Well, I don't know that I have any right to make that call. I think it's not so much important for us to talk about what should happen to Mr. Kraft, but what was the mistake that was made at the time, and how can we avoid that mistake? Because I don't think Kraft was intentionally trying to mislead the public. I think the problem on his part, and really he was in no way, shape, or form the only one that I think had this attitude. The city was thinking of itself as effectively a business partner with the Ganthers. I mean, we the city, were putting in $2 million of the $7 million to build that building, or some rather substantial fraction. And if you read those statements as if he were a business partner, they make perfect sense. And in fact, your introduction kind of alluded to that he was looking after the interests of his partner. Well, he wasn't the only one thinking of the Ganthers as a partner. I think that was the attitude that the majority of the council had. That was the way that Jackson Kinney was kind of looking at it. After all, we had this block that the city had raised. I think the city was kind of desperate to get a developer, and here's what looks like a knight in shining armor, and hooray, hooray. I don't know that there was enough skepticism about whether this was really a viable long-term project. The bandwagon got jumped on, and what you're reading is the statements of someone else on the bandwagon who's saying, well, gee, I don't know that we really want to put this stuff out into the public view. Is that the right way to approach it? Absolutely not. Should the city get into that bandwagon mentality? Absolutely not. Hopefully that's a lesson that we learn. Hopefully that's a lesson that Warren learns, and whoever is going to be our city manager becomes aware of. But whether or not Warren should keep his job, I'm not on the council anymore, so that's not my call.
Well, the council can't make that decision
It's
anyway.
not even the council.
No,
Only
yeah.
the city manager can make that determination,
Right.
and as of the 13th, he'll be gone. And it's in
Yeah.
my view, it's highly unlikely that the interim city manager will probably make any moves because, by definition, it's interim, and that person
Yeah.
won't really know the players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even the new head permanent person probably isn't going to make any changes right away, huh?
Not right
Probably,
away, I don't
probably
think.
not. But some of them may, there's some of them been there a long time. I think are getting close to retirement age. So some of them may decide that it's time for them to bow out. But one of the things about Warren Kraft is he always was risk averse and very, very conservative. This almost seems uncharacteristic for him to do. And when I read about it, I was surprised somewhat because, that's sort of a risky approach to take. If you will, let's hide this information, and of course if it never came out, you're home free.
Well, and I appreciate what you said, Kevin, about, that he maybe didn't intentionally mean to mislead anyone. The problem, and I also appreciate the fact that, the city was looking at Ben Ganther as a business partner. The problem I see here is that then the city, being a partner of Mr. Ganther's, partners are partners. They shouldn't have secrets from each other, because that's one of the keys to a successful partnership is you're open and honest with each other. And it's true of any marriage as well, which is another kind of a partnership. And it just seems like to advocate that Ganther be the only one holding the sole set of documents on this deal, something just doesn't smell right.
Oh, I agree.
You know?
I agree.
I would agree too.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't.
It definitely should not have been done that way. But if you think of what John just said about how Warren is basically conservative, is not apt to take risky stands, I don't think Warren was looking at that as a risky stand. I don't think he was looking at it as, let's take the risk of hiding it from the public. I think he was saying, let's do the conservative thing of just keeping the information under control. And again, that's really it's a mistaken, it's a wrong attitude to have, but it's an attitude that, if Dan and I were in some kind of business dealing, we wouldn't necessarily want everyone to know the particulars of our business. It's not good business for us to do that. That's not the way government should ever operate. Government has to be open. And I think Warren got caught up in the moment and made, I think, a terrible mistake.
And I will also say that, we didn't read the whole email. There were just snippets.
Yeah. Have you seen the whole email? Sure.
No, I have not. No.
Either.
And that's the point, you know, is that we have not seen the whole email. It was not published. So it is entirely possible, I suppose, that something like what the Northwestern did print is taken out of context.
Well, that's one of the questions. Is there more context? If you
know.
saw the whole email, is there more in there than
That's a really nice quote to pick out.
It is. Oh,
well,
absolutely.
It's dynamite. But what is the whole picture?
What is the whole picture? Have you asked to see the email? I mean, they apparently got it somehow, so it must be available with an open records request.
Right, and you know, but the bottom line is that obviously he advocated for Ganther and his partner to be the only people involved to have the documents.
Given, I suspect the statement is not taken out of context because the statement fairly accurately describes what in fact was done. So a statement out of context is someone saying something, but there's no reality that's behind it, and so maybe they weren't actually saying what they appeared to say. But I think he was in fact saying what he appeared to say because the city did in fact put the money into the escrow account and had all the record keeping done by the escrow agent rather than by the city staff. And yeah, the open record law is a problem from one perspective, from a developer's perspective, but as soon as you're on the public dime, you have to be open. You know, everything is public. I work for a public agency, and you can go online and find my salary. Now, most people who work for private companies, that's not possible. But if I'm going to be involved working for the state, as I am, I have to accept the fact that information about me is in the public arena. And if a developer like Ganther or anyone else, this access group, etc., if they're going to be involved in effect receiving public subsidies, they're going to have to be willing to be in the public arena. That's the only way it can and should be.
Stu Rickman in his Sunday column ends it by saying, quote, "I am outraged. I am speechless. Oshkosh, you tell me." As former council members, what advice would you have for the Common Council? Would you leave this alone? Obviously they can't dismiss him, but you know, Oshkosh, you tell me. You're part of Oshkosh. What should Oshkosh tell Stu Rickman?
I'll tell you this. Since that article was in the paper, I've had no one even mention it to me.
Really?
No. I don't hear anybody talking about it. No, I haven't asked anyone either, but I just haven't heard anyone. Clearly, you know, for the council, I think they just have to be careful that in future agreements that they're make sure that we don't have financial figures hidden away where they can't get them. And I think by the PAYGO TIF, that's unlikely, but that's the lesson. I don't know what they can do. Remember, we've already talked about the city manager is the only one with the authority to take any kind of action, but the city manager, if I were the city manager, I think Warren and I would be having a little conversation about this.
Did you, when you were evaluating the city manager on his annual performance during the time we were in the council, did you talk about him shaking up or talking with department heads as part of his performance?
Yes.
You did?
I can tell you that I met with Dick many times, and when I was mayor and when I was on the council, about some issues I had with some of the staff and my suggestions for things he might want to consider and talk to and so forth, but he clearly decided that he didn't want to take any of those actions. But you know, that's his job, and just because one council member may have some issues with someone or thinks something doesn't necessarily mean he's going to do anything about it. But it was, I think, you know, how he dealt with the staff was a subject of his reviews, and we did do reviews.
And with our current council system, there is definitely a limit on what the council can say or do about staff. I think that if I have advice for the council, it's not regarding Warren Kraft or any other staff member. It's about who they ultimately put into the position of the permanent city manager assuming we stay with that city manager system, and that in interviewing candidates and so forth, the council needs to stress the importance of openness in government. That's the problem that existed here. I think that it's probably been the problem in a number of other ways. Certainly that was the statement about why they were unhappy with Wolank in general. And I think that if they stress the importance of openness to whoever becomes the city manager, well, that city manager then has to make a decision about his or her staff and needs to emphasize to whoever is kept or hired that openness is important.
Okay. Were either of you surprised at the series of events which precipitated the retirement or the firing of the city manager?
When you say a series of events, what
Well,
really are
secretness, several open government issues. I mean, there were a series of things that occurred over the last 3 or 4 months before that, at least from a reading of the paper, sort of precipitated this meeting, private meeting. Were you surprised that this happened?
No.
No.
I wasn't.
Why not?
Well, you know, the general tenure of a city manager in most cities tends to be 3 to 5 years, and our current city manager had been there 10 years. That's a long time. And you know, there have been issues with the staff, not just with this council, with other councils, and some of the issues that are there are still there. They've been there. Were there when I was on the council. Sure. You know, we've heard about the issues with this or that department. There's nothing new about those things, and this group, for whatever reason, seemed to have a few more things that happened all of a sudden.
Okay. That's what I meant by those events.
Yeah, that just, I think.
Were you surprised, Kevin?
That, you know, just all, they said they decided they needed to do something.
Not entirely, only because of one thing. And well, actually 2 things. I would agree, first of all, Dick was in there quite a long time. The other thing is that the council that appointed Dick, none of those people are still on the council. It's an entirely new group of people. I think the council has changed. And the city manager that maybe was just fine for a much earlier council, I don't think he fit with what this council was looking for. So Dick got caught in a bad situation. The people who hired him and wanted him were no longer there, and the people who were there, I don't know that he was the right person for them any longer. So I'm not sure if it's really so much the events. Those were probably the proverbial straws on the camel's back. I wasn't surprised that something happened. It was an entirely different council.
Yeah.
Would you say secrecy was more accepted during your tenure on the council than this present one?
I don't think accepted would be the word for it. I don't think
not as concerned, maybe.
Well, I don't think it was concerned. I don't think I don't recall instances where we really felt like we weren't getting the information.
This council clearly feels that way, right?
They do, yeah. But you know, the time I was on the council, I never felt that way. I would say, did I never feel that way? No, but as a general statement, I never felt like we weren't getting the information we needed, and that happened. So.
Well, and this current council is dealing with some issues, some development issues that sort of have the shadow of the 100 block over them.
That's right.
And I think that has changed perceptions about how much, because there's always stuff that happens in closed meetings that rightfully is not shared with the public, and stuff that happens mostly that should be shared. There's always a balance, a trade-off, and there's also stuff that happens within staff that doesn't immediately get shared with council, and that was part of the problem. The council, given the issues, given the concern over the issues that are out there, when that information was not brought to them in, I think, a timely fashion, well, if there's no problem out there, not knowing about some particular issues may not be of concern. But if there is a problem, not knowing about those things becomes a big deal. And so the nature of the game has changed.
Sure.
Yeah, and this council does seem to be a lot more involved in what I would call the day-to-day management, much more so than we were. I think they view their role entirely differently.
Would you say micromanaging? Or?
Yeah, I would probably use that term.
Although I would say I had that term tossed at me quite a bit. So.
Oh, I'm surprised. I have to ask him one question.
Okay.
Are you going to be ready for snow removal on your sidewalks come winter?
Oh, sure.
Are you? Okay. Just wanted.
And the good news is that in a couple of weeks, my friend Paul Esslinger will be able to bring his kids out to our neighborhood safely because we will have sidewalks.
Well,
I know he's concerned.
I'm sure he'd be glad to hear that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And we hope to see him there too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do either of you think that this most recent thing with the 100 block might just be the catalyst to push us into a different type of government form here in Oshkosh?
Maybe.
Yeah.
The city is divided, what, 48-52?
Yeah. Yes.
Is this enough to make it divided 52-48? Quite conceivably. But, yeah, I don't stare into crystal balls, so it's hard for me to know what's going to happen. But you know, this has been an issue for 50 years now. I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to be an issue for quite some time.
No, one thing that I hope that doesn't happen, I don't want to see the council put this on the ballot. I think something this important, if there's that much interest in doing it, it ought to be citizen-led and it ought to be done by petition. If there's that many people that want to change the form of government, then a petition ought to be fairly easy to get done. And if there isn't, that shows there's enough support that it ought to be done. But to have 4 of 7 people say, well, let's do it.
Even an advisory vote?
Yeah, that's what I was
well, if you get down to the advisory vote, the one that was put forth last week, I think something like that it just isn't going to work. I read on your website that, you know, if they do one, I hope they put the current form of government as the first choice and one alternative.
I agree.
As another choice, whatever that alternative is, but to have 4 choices is just it's just too much. And what if it comes out 25, 25, 25, 20? What does that tell you? Or even if it's 30, 20, I mean, what did you learn from that? Well,
okay. All right. You know. Well, we're out of time. Thank you both for being here.
Very much.
Well, thank you for having us.
When we've got more time and another crisis on our hands. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got All Right on Oshkosh.